back your time, Chair. Now recognize the gentleman from Texas, I believe, Mr. Flores, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Administrator Pruitt, for joining us today. I want to thank you for the EPA's timely rollout of the RFS standards. I think it's the first time in the history of the RFS that was done, so I appreciate that. There's a bipartisan group of us here in Congress, including Chairman Shimkus, Peter Welch, others, and myself, that are working on a solution to this. The challenges of the current RFS statute, also with respect to RIN reform. So we may need data and input from you, and so be expecting requests from us on that. Moving to ozone for a minute, one of the challenges with ozone regs is that the 2008 standards were rolled out, and then there were huge delays in the rollout methodology from the EPA, and then the 2015 standards were levied out on top of that. That's created substantial uncertainty in our communities in terms of trying to roll out, in terms of trying to comply with two standards essentially at one time. And then when you add to that, there's a growing recognition that, let me, before I get to that, today, I think most people agree that most of the country, even based on some of the EPA's own modeling, show that most of the country will be in compliance in 7 years with both standards. And then you add to that, there's a growing recognition that international pollution is causing several communities to not be able to meet the standards. And there's actually a recent analysis by the Midwest Ozone Group of the EPA said that but for international contributions, the United States east of the Rockies would attain the 2008 and 2015 standards by 2023. So I have a couple of questions in this regard. The first one is, does it make sense to force new compliance burdens on states before existing controls have been implemented?
Well, speaking generally to those pollutants that we regulate under NAAQS, I think the 5-year review process that we engage in should be a review and not necessarily just an automatic ratcheting down, because I think when you look at the 75 parts per billion versus the 70 parts per billion that was the focus of the ozone rule, there are issues that you describe, air transport issues, background ozone, exceptional events, I think, came up earlier today. There are issues that we need to calculate and understand as those standards are set. So going forward, I think the 5-year review process should not be interpreted as an automatic ratcheting down. It should be a review of whether the levels are protective of human health.
Okay. Do you think it makes sense for states or communities to be punished for ozone that's beyond their control that comes in from other areas or background ozone?
No, in the designation process, Congressman, we try to take that into consideration. I mean, there are areas in Wisconsin, as an example, that are facing compliance issues because of air transport issues, and we're trying to calculate that into the designation process as best we can.
Good. In order to address the situations that we've just talked about, when you supplementally, in order to comply with my time limit, I'd like you to tell what you think Congress can do to help with this, and also what EPA can do under its current statutory authority.
Well, I think that, mentioning background ozone and background levels, I think there are certain parts of the country that really have, there's no economic activity that could occur and they still would be violative of the standard that has been set. And so I think Congress assisting the EPA in how to address background levels would be substantially important. I think also the exceptional events. There's a lot of confusion, better put, lack of clarity on how to apply exceptional events in the designation process and otherwise. And so I think some clarity around that would be much appreciated.
Okay, great. We're working on that. I want to take a second of my remaining time to ask for your help with an agricultural herbicide that's called glyphosate. I think is more commonly known as Roundup by the manufacturer. Last month, HHS released an agricultural health study that determined that this particular chemical does not cause cancer. Again, does not cause cancer. And that's similar to a study, the outcome of a study that the EPA made this past March. The challenge is that the state of California and the International Association for the Research of Cancer are claiming that it does, and that creates uncertainty among our agricultural community as well as the manufacturer of this particular herbicide. And of course, we've got to get all this sorted out, because you've got one group of folks saying it does, you've got two other government agencies saying that it does not cause cancer. Can I get a commitment from you to have your team take a look at this to try to sort this out?
Yes, and I think, there's been another study, I think, at NIH that was similar to the one you cited. So there is some clarity that we need to provide on this going forward, and yes, we need to work with you and others in the committee that are concerned about that.
Okay. Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Chair